It's that time of year again. We've got you covered with a new Safeguarding Refresher course for the academic year 2024 to 2025. This is a free resource brought to you by the Safeguarding in Education team from Bristol City Council alongside the Keeping Bristol Safe partnership. It's anticipated that you're watching the video as part of your annual training requirement from Keeping Children Safe in Education. It might be that you've just come back from your holidays or just about to go on your holidays. We hope that this time is protected and that you're able to use this opportunity to reflect on your practice without distractions of the day-to-day work.
As with any safeguarding training, it's good to ensure that you stay safe during this session. Here are a few considerations to help you achieve this. Content can be difficult and triggering. Talking about child abuse and safeguarding can be a sensitive topic. It may resonate with our personal experiences or trigger professional experiences for children and families we are currently working with. Please do give yourself space and time during and following the training. If you are in a training session with other colleagues, please also support each other. If someone needs some time out, do consider checking in to see if they are okay. If you're watching this live with colleagues, do be mindful of confidentiality if you wish to talk about cases. Everyone has a right to a private life. Do anonymise cases. Imagine if it was your family that was being discussed. You may not be very happy that your family circumstances were discussed during a team training session. Respect each other's views. This is meant to be a safe learning environment. We all have different backgrounds, values and beliefs. If you disagree with someone, try not to make it personal and consider their truths, as we'd want others to consider ours. Please minimise distractions if this is a live session. Timekeeping. Designated safeguarding leads or training facilitators, you may wish to pause the video at this point to agree break times and when you expect to finish. For a good learning experience, it is important you feel comfortable to ask questions, although be mindful, if someone doesn't know the answer, they may need to get back to you.
The aims of this training is to support you to refresh your safeguarding knowledge, provide you with any key updates, both nationally and locally, and for you to be able to apply these in the context of your day-to-day work. Changes in statutory guidance. The changes are not significant, but hopefully will resonate with your existing practice. Child sexual abuse. There is a national trend that this is going unnoticed and unreported. The training will reflect on some of the factors that might contribute towards this and provide you with the opportunity to reflect on your values and your behaviours. Community safety. There have been many events locally which have likely impacted you and your school community. This section will consider what you can do in your role to be ready and respond to any future incidents. Safer working practice. How can you keep yourself and others safe in your role and working environment? On to our first objective, changes in statutory guidance. We have 3 new versions of statutory guidance to hit the stage. You'll be glad to know that most of you will not need to read the whole of these documents. These might be more relevant for your strategic leaders. However, please don't think they don't apply to you. It's helpful to know what's in them and do consider picking up the document and having a further explore. Sometimes when we rely on information being filtered through from others, there is a danger that some of the messages can get lost along the way. First to hit the stage is Working Together to Safeguard Children 2023. Whilst not a statutory requirement, we strongly recommend that anyone who works directly with children and families read this document. Part 1, a shared responsibility, is particularly helpful to focus on. Following this is fan favourite Keeping Children Safe in Education. This document is probably the most familiar to you. You will all need to read Part 1 of this document and Annex B. Annex A is an option for staff who don't work directly with children. You'll be glad to know there aren't any significant updates this year. Our final guidance, what is the freshest topic to hit the statutory status during the summer of 2024, is Working Together to Improve School Attendance. We hope this isn't the first time you've heard of it, but essentially it's recognising the importance of school attendance and ensuring that all education settings take a consistent, trauma-informed approach to school attendance, working with other statutory agencies such as the police, the local authority and health to try and address any underlying issues for poor or non-school attendance. First of all, Working Together to Safeguard Children, a veteran of statutory guidance. It was first published to reflect the learning for some of our serious case reviews and where there have been serious failings on agencies to share information and effectively work together. It's been 5 years since we last had an update, and this version has taken into consideration a national review into the country's child protection and early help system. This version provides us with a new definition of safeguarding. This adds more emphasis on the need to provide early help as soon as problems emerge, protecting children from harm within and outside the home, including online, and the introduction of the Children's Social Care National Framework. There are developed principles on how professionals should work with children and families. These reflect learning and feedback from the independent review into child protection and early help. Hopefully these resonate with how you already work and how you'd like to be treated with regards to your own personal experiences. There are more structural changes in how the local safeguarding partnerships are led and managed. This also includes how partners work better to include education as a sector, both operationally and strategically. There is a greater emphasis on how partners need to work to address extrafamilial harm. This next part is just an opportunity to reflect on your practice. Do you feel your setting has effective child-focused systems? Too often, we can fall into the trap of meeting the system's needs at the expense of meeting the child's needs. Have a think whether there are examples of where this can happen in your setting. Taken from part 1 of Working Together to Safeguard Children, here are some components that children have highlighted that build an effective child-focused system. Take 10 minutes to have a discussion to think about what mechanisms help you put these into action. For example, vigilance. Your setting has a vulnerable children's list which is shared with staff so they can keep an eye out for those children who may be struggling more than their peers. Keeping Children Safe in Education 2024 has largely reflected some of the changes in Working Together to Safeguard Children 2023. This includes the definition of safeguarding being revised, the profile of extrafamilial harm and domestic abuse being raised, and thinking about attendance. Encouraging you to exercise professional curiosity to consider where children are if they're not at school, and why that might be. In Annex B, there's been further information provided about supporting children in the court system and preventing radicalisation. Other updates include a section in Part 2, Children Potentially at Greater Risk of Harm, the management of supports for LGBT+ children. This section was revised in the draft version to incorporate recommendations from the highly contested CAS review, which was used as a basis for the last government administration's gender guidance for schools. At the point of this video resource being created, the finalised version has not been published. It is likely that this has been modified with the finalised version published on September the 1st. Whatever the status of the guidance, and regardless to your own personal views and beliefs, do remember the paramountcy principle, where the welfare and safety of children should always be a paramount consideration. This should be implemented regardless of the child's gender identity or their parents' views. Last but not least, working together to improve school attendance. We know since the pandemic, for some families, attendance has been negatively impacted, and this might be due to a whole host of worries and concerns. This guidance has actually been around for a year or so, but only reached statutory status in the summer. Alongside this, the last government put in more robust consequences for parents and carers not sending their children to school. This might be tackling the symptoms, not the cause. The guidance is only one part of trying to improve a systemic approach to tackling the cause of children who are missing from education, and support agencies joining up alongside providing early help as soon as problems present. It intends to standardise practice across the workforce and partnership to maintain high levels of school attendance. Reasons for poor school attendance can be due to a whole range of concerns. Consideration for an effective wider school culture, attendance will be linked to your daily efforts on the curriculum, behaviour, tackling bullying, supporting special educational needs, pastoral and mental health and well-being, and effective use of resources. When we think about poor attendance being linked to extrafamilial harm, such as child exploitation, grooming, and/or child-on-child harm, we can see why the document is called Working Together to Improve School Attendance. It cannot solely be the preserve of a single member of staff or organisation. It must be a concerted effort across all teaching and non-teaching staff in school, the trust or governing body, the local authority, and other local partners such as the police and health. Trauma-informed practice. Have a go at flexing your professional curiosity skills. In groups or pairs, think about questions you may want to ask and actions you may want to take to support ongoing attendance. These scenarios may not on the surface appear to be attendance related, but do consider where to make the connections and how to remain child-focused and trauma-informed. 1. Hitting a teacher during a physical intervention when refusing to leave a toilet stall. This leads to a suspension. 2. Dealing with an internal isolation following an outburst of swearing in the classroom. 3. A child not attending school as they have been involved in a child-on-child incident and feel unsafe. Pause the video so you can have a discussion. Child sexual abuse. This is a highly distressing topic, but we do need to talk about it and think about why there is significant underreporting of the issue. It is important that we demonstrate trauma-informed practice to ourselves, though. Some of the materials in this section can resonate with some of you and be upsetting. You or someone you may know could be a survivor of sexual abuse. If you do need to step outside the room, please consider taking some space. Please look after yourself and each other during this section. Sexual abuse can take on many different forms. We generally categorise the different types under intrafamilial, or sexual abuse within the family and/or home. Child-on-child sexually harmful behaviour. This is where sexual harm happens between children under the age of 18. Sexual exploitation. This is where the perpetrator of harm is normally an adult towards the child, who is the victim, and is not known to the family. Often the abuse happens over time with elements of control, grooming, and enticing the child into sexual activity for the perpetrator's own benefit. Technology-assisted online sexual abuse. This is where abuse can happen virtually, such as using texts, sexploitation, and sexual harassment. This is an excerpt of a poem written by a child survivor who recently performed at this year's Festival of Activism Against Child Sexual Abuse in Bristol. She has provided permission for her poem to be shared as part of her recovery, and she wants frontline professionals to think about a survivor's lived experience of managing trauma in an educational context.
When we flee, feet carry us through the abundance of trees. We wince as bursts of pain shoot up through our legs in quick succession. Those roots, grabbing the ankles again, we are not allowed to escape. Denial, panic, problem, flashback, fight, flight, freeze or flop. Their branches spring at us with staggering force as we shield our battered face. Our ears, our nose, our lips are bluish and bruised.
Pause and recall the previous exercise. All three scenarios are from the same child who wrote the poem. Take a moment to consider whether, in retrospect, you would act differently, now knowing this child is a survivor of sexual abuse. Here are some tips from the survivor around how to respond to when you come across a child who is panicking, using the mnemonic PANIC. P. Pause. Take a minute to think about the situation around you. Is this a suitable place? Do you need other staff support? Is the child safe? Are other children safe? A. Assess. Assess the child's needs, physical and mental well-being. This could be offering fresh air, a quiet space, somewhere to sit, a fidget toy, or a glass of water. N. Notice. Notice changes over a period of panic. Completion, breathing, tics, ability to self-regulate, dizziness, ability to talk, walk, or respond. I. Include. Include the student in decision-making. Start with yes or no questions, give the choice of location, enable the child to take back control. C. Calm. Remain calm. Help the child get back to self-regulation. This gives them control over themselves, which is one of the most important tools for recovery. Nationally, over the years, sexual abuse is consistently the lowest recorded number of types of category of child protection plan a child is placed on while suffering or likely to suffer significant harm. The highest is neglect, next is emotional harm, then physical abuse, and then sexual abuse. Why do you think this is? Locally, in 2022 to 23, Bristol had the second lowest rate out of 11 comparable local authorities of assessments completed under the category of child sexual abuse. Since 2012, there have been several years where Bristol has placed less than 5 children on child protection plans under a category of sexual abuse during that year. This includes 2022 to 23. The Centre of Expertise on Child Sexual Abuse highlights that nationally, we're only skimming the tip of the iceberg in terms of the numbers we're dealing with. There is a huge disparity, with only 2,300 children nationally being subject to a child protection plan under the category of sexual abuse, and a whopping estimated 500,000 children being abused every year being undetected by statutory services. Why do we think that this is? It may not be that all of us are unaware of these cases, it might just be how we respond to concerns when they are raised. Take a moment to discuss how we respond to the issues of status and protected characteristics when it comes to abuse. Let's be reflexive. The ability for us to be aware of the way we behave towards others. You will need to lean into some difficult discussions and reflect on your own values and behaviours. If you're doing this with other people, please remember to respect each other's views and experiences. Take 5 to 10 minutes. Discuss age, gender, race, ethnicity, SEND, special educational needs and disabilities, and care experience, whether they're looked after or not. Pause the video for a discussion, don't get feedback, but play again for further data and facts. When we are considering age, children are disproportionately likely to be victims of sexual offences. Children account for 40% of all sexual offences, but only make up 20% of the population. The legal definition of a child is anyone under the age of 18. The age of consent for sexual activity is 16, and the age of criminal responsibility is 10. With this in mind, let's have a look at the data around age when abuse started. Have you got any additional thoughts? You may want to pause the video to discuss and take some feedback. Our concept of age for teenagers in particular are likely to impact on whether a child is culpable or responsible for their behaviour, and potentially what happens to them. Often, it's easier to see younger children as victims of harm and abuse. There is a real risk of adultification. This is putting adult expectations on children. Let's have a look at gender. 15% of girls and 5% of boys are estimated to experience some sort of sexual abuse before the age of 16. This may reflect some of your discussions where we are most readily able to identify girls and young women as victims. Further gender-related data from the Centre of Expertise on Child Sexual Abuse highlights when it came to technology-assisted abuse, 92% of child sexual abuse images depicted girls in 2019. When it came to looking at adult perpetrators, it's noted that 92% of perpetrators of child sexual abuse were male. Why do we think this is? Pause the video and take some feedback from the previous discussions. Although it's important to consider the parameters of what the data shows us, it only reflects known reported cases. Although even when accounting for this, there is a significant pattern and trend that violence against women and girls is a significant problem. There is no significant difference in the likelihood of experiencing child sexual abuse due to ethnicity in England, but people from the global majority are more likely to face barriers to reporting abuse. Why do we think this is? Pause the video and take some feedback from the previous discussions. Whilst research and data is limited around special educational needs and disabilities, we know that disabled adults are twice as likely to say that they have experienced abuse in their childhood than non-disabled adults. Why do we think this is? Pause the video and take some feedback from the previous discussions. And finally, 1 in 4 of those who lived in a care home reported experiences of sexual abuse. This was 4 times as many as those living with their family and carers. Why do we think this is? Pause the video and take some feedback from the previous discussions. Take a well-deserved break. You've been talking about some heavy content. Please do check in with each other too. Pause the video and start again when you're ready. Our own discomfort around hearing children's experiences may shape what we hear and how we respond. In a local serious case review in Bristol, Operation Brook, one of the findings was around when a child disclosed a rape to a professional. The professional turned red. Although this was thought to be completely involuntary, how would this have made the child feel? Have a think about how our personal responses can impact on the children we work with. Have a conversation with groups or pairs to think about how your own identity, values, experiences have shaped how comfortable we speak about sex and sexuality. Use the questions on screen to help shape your discussions. Pause the video so you can have a discussion. It is acknowledged this is a difficult topic to talk about. The Greenhouse, a local charity that supports survivors and their families, brings you some thoughts around what works in an education setting. They will publish some guidance for professionals which will be cascaded later in the year. This is a sneak preview highlighting the lived experiences and offers suggestions from survivors and their parents and carers. Model respect and consent in all relationships. Cultivate space for difference and acceptance. Actively invite discussion and education about consent and sex in relationships. Whole school approaches to sexism, misogyny, and harassment. Trust and taken seriously. The biggest thing is trust. Because this has been broken already, if you say you're going to do something, please do it. Understanding trauma. The worst thing was having the school treat her like a naughty child. She isn't being naughty, she's had a big trauma and is doing the best she can. It's important that teachers know that and don't make her feel even worse. Choice, voice, and control. Choice doesn't mean that everything goes. Often, offering between options A and B can already feel very relieving. Be proactive. When someone has the courage to speak up about what's happened to them, at that point, actively offer some support. Don't expect them to come back and ask. That's asking them to take another step. When thinking about technology-assisted child sexual abuse, the National Crime Agency wrote to every school this year to warn them of the increasing levels of sextortion. Sextortion involves people being forced into paying money or meeting other financial demands after an offender has threatened to release nude or semi-nude photos of them. This could be a real photo taken by the victim or a fake image created of them by the offender. Take 5 minutes to answer the 3 questions. If you can't answer them, perhaps it might be a sign that it's worth doing some extra reading. 1. What's a CEOP? 2. What are report remove and take it down? 3. Where can you get further advice and guidance? Pause the video to allow for a quick discussion. When you're ready, restart the video for the answers. CEOP stands for Child Exploitation Online Protection, a department for the National Crime Agency who take action and respond to incidents of harm online that involve child exploitation. They operationalise cases and work with national and international police to keep children safe. They also support by developing resources and training for frontline professionals. Report to Remove is an online tool developed by Childline and the Internet Watch Foundation to allow children under the age of 18 to report sexual images or videos of themselves that have been shared online, with a focus on child-centered and non-judgmental image removal. Take It Down is a similar program, but provided by the United States organization, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Reporting harmful content on platforms that you may or may not have knowledge of can be overwhelming and confusing. Do not fear. There is a free service that can assist you to navigate through this and helps you get further advice and guidance. The Professionals Online Safety Helpline is a free resource for professionals supported by all major online safety charities in the UK. It might be worth being aware of this helpline and ensuring it's accessible by downloading or putting up a poster in the staff room.
Now, we're going to look at some of the things that may happen in our local community, which could affect how we perceive and maintain our safety in our settings for our staff and our children alike. Whilst not directly referring in depth to the tragic incidents which have happened in Bristol in the past academic year, we recognise that some of you may find this section upsetting. We would ask that you ensure you seek out support as needed from within your setting. As we are all aware, there have been several critical incidents in Bristol in 2024, some of which were sadly in quick succession. This tragic loss of life of Bristol children due to serious youth violence and a number of stabbings in our communities have no doubt had a ripple effect on our settings. This impact will have affected our children, families, friends and relatives, perhaps leaving them feeling vulnerable and afraid for their safety. Coupled with other tragic loss of life in our city, it is even more important that we need a plan to keep our settings safe and ensure we respond appropriately and in a timely way to offer support and ensure business continuity. Wider community concerns, such as riots and protests over the summer, have also had an impact on our feelings of safety and security. So, what can we do about this to ensure that we have an appropriate response to critical incidents? And what is a critical incident? What is a critical incident? A sudden and unexpected event that has the potential to overwhelm the coping mechanisms of a whole school or members of the school community. It is a serious and significant event. It is likely to be outside the range of normal human experience and would be markedly distressing to anyone in or directly involved with the school community. We should also consider that whilst the expected death of a pupil or member of staff or the death of a parent or grandparent is undoubtedly a sad event, it would not usually be considered a critical incident, although undoubtedly children and staff in your setting would likely need your support and guidance. Critical incidents can happen in education settings, such as the sudden or unexpected death of a member of the community, a serious accident involving students or staff on or off site, a violent attack or intrusion on premises, fire, floor or building collapse. In the community, a road traffic accident, a terrorist attack, a disaster, large-scale fire or a natural disaster, for example. And we have national or global critical incidents, such as a war, a national emergency or a pandemic. So how do you understand your local need? Intergenerational conflict, turf wars, serious youth violence. Following the murders of the Bristol children, we have been tasked to undertake further work on the perceptions in education of community safety as part of information gathering for the statutory Child Safeguarding Practice Review. We are currently working with Caroline Boswell, who has been commissioned to review education's role in safeguarding children at risk of and/or experience extrafamilial harm and serious youth violence. The wider review will involve designated safeguarding leads and other leaders in education. The partnership is keen to understand why previous reviews and strategies in this area have not resulted in the change we hope for in the system, and it will identify opportunities and new ways of working for our children. So we are seeking education professionals' help to consider how the partnership can improve their assessment, intelligence gathering, community knowledge and response to conflict within an area or group. We are interested in how the partnership's response can be tailored to different types of conflict, violence and exploitation, being mindful of social contexts of those involved. So we ask that you follow the link in the QR code to a short survey. Please ensure that you complete this individually so that we can get as many responses as possible. Thank you. Now take 5 to 10 minutes to complete the survey using the QR link. How can you support your setting to respond to an incident? Reflect on the recent far-right riots and the Islamophobic hate attacks over the summer. Emotional support and well-being for staff and children. Site safety and continuity planning. Safeguarding on the curriculum and PSHE. Staff training and CPD. Work in groups of people with similar roles to yours and look at a category that you feel relates to your role in the setting. For example, you may feel that as a site manager, you can contribute to the site safety and continuity planning aspect. Or, as a teacher, you may feel that you can contribute to safeguarding on the curriculum and the PSHE offer following an incident. Take 10 minutes, discuss what you can do in your role to prepare and respond to an incident. Your role in supporting and responding. Know who is responsible for what and how to contact them. Are numbers and email addresses published on the staff notice board? In policies? Where would you find them? Identify what mental health support there is. Is there a mental health first aider for the children? What support will your staff need? Know who your vulnerable children are in your class and year groups. They may need some extra support and input from yourselves. Know your parents, carers and wider community needs. Be proactive, prepare and plan, and know where those plans are. Make sure you share information and intelligence in a timely manner and with the right people. Make sure you engage with training and planning. Think about messaging and a single point of truth, making sure that you comply with any legal obligations and data protection obligations. As part of an ongoing review process, identify gaps and areas of vulnerability within your teams. And lastly, check in with each other. Ask for help and support if you have been affected.
We're now coming to the final module of our annual refresher training. In this module, we will be thinking about safer working practice, and it's important that all members of staff have a clear understanding of what this means and what this might look like, as well as understanding who they should speak to if they have any concerns, no matter how small. This slide is an opportunity for you to refresh your knowledge. The following are 3 terms which should be familiar to you. These terms are whistleblowing, the harm test, and low-level concerns. Take a few minutes now to discuss these terms with the person who's next to you or the people on your table. Please consider the following. What do these terms mean, or what are they referring to? And who in your setting would you report concerns to?
Pause the video so you can have a discussion.
It's time now to reflect on your thoughts. First of all, let's consider whistleblowing. Whistleblowing refers to when a worker makes a disclosure of information which they reasonably believe shows wrongdoing or someone covering up wrongdoing. This could be, for example, somebody falsifying documents, altering records, or misspending funds. Every setting should have a clear whistleblowing procedures and policy. Do you know where to access yours? Who would you report to if any concerns about wrongdoing? Usually this would be the head or the principal. But if your concerns relate to the head or the principal, then the chair of governors or equivalent should be informed. Now, we do understand that sometimes you may not feel confident for various reasons in approaching your head or your chair of governors, in which case you can always whistleblow anonymously through the NSPCC. It's better to report than not. The harm test. Schools and colleges should have their own procedures for dealing with safeguarding concerns or allegations that are made against those working in or on behalf of schools in a paid or unpaid capacity, i.e. members of staff, including supply teachers, volunteers and contractors. The harm test is considered when managing cases of concerns or allegations that might indicate when a person could pose a risk of harm to children if they continue to work with children. An individual is said to have met the harm test if they are thought to have done one or more of the following: if they have behaved in a way that has or may have harmed a child, and or possibly committed a criminal offence against or related to a child, and or behaved towards a child or children in a way that indicates that he or she may pose a risk of harm to children, and or behaved or may have behaved in a way that indicates they may not be suitable to work with children. If that is the case and the harm test is thought to be met, then this must be reported to the local authority designated officer, often abbreviated to the LADO. If you are aware of any member of staff who has directly met the harm test, for example, behaved in a way that has harmed a child, then you must report it. Most settings expect these concerns to be reported to their head teacher or principal because of the serious nature of those concerns. Are you clear who you should be reporting your concerns to? And finally, low-level concerns. Low-level concerns are not insignificant. A low-level concern is any concern, no matter how small and even if no more than causing a sense of unease or nagging doubt, that an adult working in or on behalf of your setting may have acted in a way that is inconsistent with your staff code of conduct, and that includes inappropriate conduct outside of work. And it also means it does not meet the harm threshold as otherwise not serious enough to be considered a referral to the LADO. The important thing here is when behaviour is inconsistent with your staff code of conduct. How well do you know your staff code of conduct, and is it worth revisiting this as additional work following the training today? As part of your whole school approach to safeguarding, settings should ensure that they promote an open and transparent culture in which all concerns about all adults are dealt with promptly and appropriately. Effective safeguarding cultures should enable settings to identify inappropriate, problematic or concerning behaviour early, minimise the risk of abuse, and ensure that staff are clear about professional boundaries. Head teachers and governing bodies are responsible for managing teachers in relation to their competence and conduct, for example, taking action to address any underperformance, and also for less serious misconduct within schools and relevant settings. Where a teacher may have, for example, met the harm test through an investigation or an accumulation of low-level concerns means that the harm test has been met, a referral to the Teaching Regulation Agency may be required. So what does the Teaching Regulation Agency do? They are responsible for investigating serious misconduct where a teacher's alleged behaviour is fundamentally incompatible with being a teacher. Additionally, they are also responsible for prohibiting teachers from teaching who have been found to commit serious misconduct. The Teaching Regulation Agency is a relatively new organisation. As you can see on the screen, we're now going to be considering the number of assessed referrals and misconduct hearings that have taken place over the last few years. You can see on the screen that between the years 2021 and 22, there were 714 assessed referrals of teacher misconduct. Up to 22 to 23, that number rose to 1,038. Given what we know about the introduction of low-level concerns guidance and improved safeguarding practices, do you think the number of assessed referrals of teacher misconduct is higher from the year 23 to 24 or lower? As you can see, the number of referrals has in fact increased to 1,680. You may wish to stop the recording and consider why you think that might be the case. Additionally, the number of actual hearings that have taken place, we can see on the screen, between 2021 and 22, there were 148. Between 22 and 23, this rose to 207. Whether do you think that the number of hearings for the year 23 to 24 is higher or lower than 207? As you can see, the number of hearings that took place in the year 23 to 24 is 244, so it has gone up, but possibly not by as much as you may have thought. Sticking with the Teaching Regulation Agency, we've got a little scenario-based exercise for you. The majority of incidents that are reported to and subsequently resulted in a prohibition from teaching relate to the sexual abuse of children, but not all of them. The Teaching Regulation Agency will also consider unacceptable professional conduct and conduct that may bring the profession into disrepute. With this in mind, here are 4 examples of behaviours that have been reported to the Teaching Regulation Agency for you to consider. Please discuss on your tables whether or not you think the following did or did not result in a teacher being prohibited from teaching. By now you should have read through the 4 examples, 4 scenarios of information that has been reported to the Teaching Regulation Agency. It may be that you don't all agree. What's really important here to understand is that really what they're thinking around is unacceptable professional conduct and conduct that may bring the profession into disrepute. And while we have talked about the majority of incidents being reported and resulting in a prohibition from teaching being related to the sexual abuse of children, it is really important that staff understand that some of the behaviours you exhibit outside of work can lead to being prohibited from teaching. Of the 4 true or false scenarios that I gave you, every single one of those resulted in a teacher being prohibited from teaching. So it's really important to consider the following. Actually, do I fully understand our school code of conduct, our staff code of conduct? Do we as a setting refer to this regularly enough? And do we need to review any aspects of our code of conduct? These are all things that you may wish to consider following the training in light of what you've seen here today. Navigating the grey areas. Safeguarding is rarely black and white, and we often talk about how much of a grey area it is because there are just so many variables, and you may have found this in the discussions on the previous slide. The headings on the next 4 slides reflect some of the more common issues raised regarding staff behaviour. It is important that all staff are aware of the ways in which we can manage these situations safely, even if they think it does not apply to them. For example, they may witness something and need to understand whether the response was appropriate and safe. The title for this slide is Ushering a Disruptive Pupil Out of the Classroom. This is something many of us have either been involved in or may have witnessed. I'd like you to, on your tables, to have a few minutes to discuss how do we ensure that this is managed safely. If we need to usher a pupil out of the classroom, what needs to happen to ensure that this is managed as safely as possible?
Pause the video so you can have a discussion.
So what do we need to consider to ensure that ushering a pupil out of a classroom is managed safely? We need to consider there will be more than one member of staff who's had training in handling techniques. Training should help all staff to recognise whether this is necessary and done appropriately after all other options have been considered. Clear reporting procedures are really important. Any incident of physical intervention, even if it is escorting a pupil out of the room, must be reported. Appropriate recording measures are essential. Ideally, a bound and numbered book, but if you are using CPOMs, then it may be appropriate to have a checklist of the kind of information that needs to be recorded, as a bound and numbered book would prompt. For example, is it recording everybody who was present, everybody who witnessed the incident, what the de-escalation strategies were tried, whether an existing plan was followed, what was the language that was used by the people who were involved, including the child and other children who may have witnessed it, who has verified the accounts given by all of the witnesses. We need to record whether the child was given appropriate cooling off time, whether any staff came in and took over, if a child was held, who held them, where was this done, what was the duration, what was the reasoning for the type of hold, and what type of hold was used, and the child's account of the incident when they have been able to cool off and reflect, and essentially as well who contacted the parents and what information was shared, and whether a behaviour plan was followed or is now required. These are just some of the examples that might need to be considered. Behaviour plans should be created for pupils where this may happen, and preventative work should be a focus as part of that behaviour plan. And there need to be debriefing opportunities for everyone, and that includes all children who may have witnessed any part of the process, as they may not understand why it has happened and it may make them feel unsafe or frightened. Sharing confidential pupil information from one member of staff to another. This is something that frequently needs to happen within settings. We need to ensure that we're doing this safely. So please take a few minutes on your tables to discuss how do we ensure that we are managing the sharing of confidential pupil information between staff safely.
Pause the video so you can have a discussion.
So how do we ensure that we are safely managing the sharing of confidential pupil information? Well, the golden rule is to only share when it's necessary. And we also need to understand what is confidential. And just because you want to know doesn't mean necessary that you need to know. We need to record what information has been shared and with who. Think about the location that you're in. Talking in a corridor or a staff room is not appropriate for confidential information sharing. And consider how you would report gossiping about families. We all know that it happens in settings. We need to be really careful about how we think around reporting that and managing that as a low-level concern. It's always important to consider whether you would feel comfortable if your family was being talked about in this way. Is this part of your code of conduct, for example? And do all staff understand about how to report low-level concerns? Remember, this is about keeping everyone safe, and that includes you as staff. How do we ensure that we safely manage needing to take a detour when we're transporting a child home? Though this is not generally agreed common practice, there are always instances and situations where this might be necessary, in which case it's important to understand how we make this situation safer. Please take a few moments on your table to discuss how you would safely manage needing to take a detour when transporting a child home.
Pause the video so you can have a discussion.
So how do we ensure we're managing a situation safely if we need to take a detour when we're transporting a child home? Though we recognise this may not be common practice, there are often instances where children do need to be taken home by members of staff. And it's not to say that that shouldn't be done when it's needed, but there are ways that we can make sure that this is done safely. Firstly, it's really important that we're sharing routes with other staff including any changes of plans, and that we only detour if absolutely necessary. For example, there are roadworks or there's been an accident. Generally speaking, going via a shop would not be considered a necessary detour. This both apply for whether it's a planned trip or an unplanned trip, and it's really important to ensure that any information is also shared with parents and carers. They need to know what time to expect you back, and if you're going on a detour, this might cause additional anxiety if it takes longer to get home. Try not to be alone in a car unless it's absolutely necessary as some form of emergency. And there are actions that can be taken to try and create additional safety. This may include, for example, the child sitting in the back of the car. It may need that different staff check in with the child after the event to check that they felt okay, felt safe, and that they were all right, and how they feel about it. They may, in some instances, for example, try and engineer it happening again if they enjoyed the fact they didn't have to walk. It's important that we're aware of these situations. Do consider hands-free communications. Some members of staff have used hands-free phone where another member of staff can listen in and be part of the car conversation. That's a way of adding additional safety. And do inform parents at the time. It may need to be a colleague who does this so that parent knows when to expect you home. Remember. And lastly, in this section, we're considering needing to assist a child with toileting. On your tables, please can you take a few moments to discuss how you would manage this safely? How would you safely manage the need to assist a child with toileting? Remember, this could be as part of a plan or it could be a one-off measure.
Pause the video so you can have a discussion.
So, how do we ensure we're safely assisting children with toileting? It's really important that whether this is a temporary measure or part of a care routine that we make a plan. This could be, for example, due to a temporary measure such as broken wrists or a long-term measure such as a disability. Either way, it's important that we involve the child and the parents and carers. Children should always have a say in who they feel most comfortable helping them, and we need to make sure we factor in frequent reviews. We also need to ensure that we plan for staff absence and we record this on the plan. Children should not be prevented from using the toilet because their designated staff member is away or unavailable. So identifying more than one member of staff and mixing up on those days could be useful. Have a separate staff member who's not part of that process checking in with a child. Are they still comfortable with this arrangement? Consider which physical toilet will be used and who else may need it. Shared toilets are unlikely to be appropriate or practical, so we need to also consider our equalities duties. Do monitor attendance and behaviour. Actively look for signs that things might not be okay. Ensure that you keep records, frequency of toilet use, any issues, any meetings that you have, and any information that may be shared or how issues were resolved. And you may wish to consider a separate toileting policy to ensure all areas are being considered. Remember, this is about keeping everyone safe, and that includes you as staff.
This brings this year's refresher video to a close. We appreciate that the content was heavy, but would like to end on a lighter note. This is a video which was created by Unique Voice in association with Crime Stoppers 7 years ago. I'm sure as you watch it, you'll agree the content still applies today.
Community Spirit by Casey Fitzgerald. In our community, we have a responsibility to work together in unity. Be positive in where you live, help our neighbours and try to give. Be polite and don't fight, don't discriminate, we have equal rights. Do you litter or keep Bristol clean? Do you help others or are you mean? If you see crime, report what's on your mind. Remember at the time to dial 999. Call Crime Stoppers if you don't know what to do. It's completely anonymous, so your friends won't know it's you. If you are good, behave how you should, and then we will have a better neighbourhood. We work together as a team, so it will no longer be a dream.
Have a think about how you can apply your learning from this training to your settings community. Do support and check out Unique Voices materials on their website and YouTube channel. Thank you for engaging, and if you want to keep abreast of safeguarding developments, please check out our website, bristolsafeguardingineducation.org, and sign up to our mailing list, or follow us on X at @setbristol. Links are in the description.